Welcome to Sunlit Brushstrokes. Today we'll be using watercolor pencils to draw, color, and paint these lovely flowers. We'll start with an easy allium, move on to some cosmos, and finally finish with this layered zinnia. Let's go ahead and get started. So for my supplies, I have a number of small pieces of watercolor paper that I've cut into just a variety of sizes. What you could do if you want to be able to frame these or use them in a card, you could cut them specifically the size that you're after, but I just kind of have a random number of sizes and ratios here. And these are a combination of Canson XL as well as an Artist Loft paper, just again, another cheaper student grade paper that I had around. I don't think we need anything super high quality for this project because we're going to be layering with watercolor pencil. I'm going to be working with my Staedtler watercolor pencils today, but I also have a couple of olive greens or neutral greens that I'm going to be adding to the mix. This one is by Derwent and it is called Olive Green, and this one is a Faber Castel and it is called Cedar Green. But to make this easy to follow along, no matter what brand of pencils you use, I'm just going to go ahead and do a little quick sample of each of my pencils, and then you can take a screenshot and match that with whatever pencils you have, or you can go ahead and use whatever colors you would like, but I'll just let you see the ones I have. I'm just going to go ahead and wet them. So here I've got a light olive green, a medium olive green, and a dark olive green. For neutrals, I have a burnt sienna and a golden ochre, and then my yellow, orange, red orange, pink, a darker pink or a magenta, a purple pink, which I'll sometimes call mauve, purple, and a nice deep blue, very similar to an ultramarine. And if you want to match colors with mine, you're welcome to screenshot this and see what colors you have that are close to these. And now you'll notice that I've laid these colors out in order of the color wheel. And part of the reason I've done it this way is because this is actually the way I work. When I'm painting or coloring, I'll usually start with the lighter or the color that's warmer, and I'll gradually work my way towards colors that are darker and cooler. This is my color wheel from our color theory lesson. And if you've watched that, you know that I like to start with my lighter colors or my warmer colors and then work my way towards the darker and cool colors on the color wheel. And you're going to see the color choices that I'm making today or almost any time is going to be following that principle. The first flower we're going to do today is Allium. It's a super fun, easy flower, and I thought it would be a fun one to get started on. So I'm going to put a couple of dots on my paper to show where I want the center of my flowers to be, and then I'm going to work my way from there, creating maybe like a couple X's or even dividing these into like 6, almost like a pie. And these are just going to provide some guides for us as we draw these flowers. So what we're going to be doing after we've done that is we're just going to create a lot of little lines radiating out from the center of these flowers, almost like spokes on a wagon wheel or a bike tire. So I'm just going to go work my way around. You don't have to be super perfectionistic here, but just sort of create these sort of within the shape of a circle. Then we're going to go in and do these little flowers. And to do these, you're almost making like tiny little stars or scribbles that are similar to a flower, but they don't even have to exactly look like a flower. You're just going to go around and just kind of do like these little scribbles, and you can do some flowers, some that are just like little dots, or like I say, just scribbly little things. And we're going to just go around the entire outside of this flower, or I should say these are a ton of little flowers kind of radiating randomly from a center, aren't they? So as I work my way around, I'm going to start working towards the center of this flower, and I'm going to actually start applying lighter pressure. So I'm doing exactly the same thing, but I'm not going to be working as heavily, or my pressure that I'm putting on the pencil is a little bit lighter. I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing to this one. I'm going to try and be a little bit more scribbly this time. I feel like my last ones were just a little bit more rounded. I'm going to just try and be a little bit more scribbly with the way I do my flowers so that they're almost a little bit more like a star. Or maybe the better way to say it is create the edges just a little more jagged than the last one. I feel like some of these could have been a little bit more scribbly, if you will. So I'm going to go scribble them up a little bit. Once I've done that, I'm going to grab my purple pink or my mauve, and I'm just going to go in and just do a very light bit of coloring on the right side of this flower because I'm going to pretend that the light source is coming from over here on the right, and so it's creating a little bit more warmth in this flower or cluster of flowers on the right side. And then on the left side of each of these, I'm going to be using some blue. So this is my darker blue, kind of royal blue, and I'm just going to repeat this. I'm just kind of doing really scribbly coloring. I'm almost kind of going in a crescent shape with my blue so that I create this side of the flower or cluster of flowers being darker and cooler because it's away from the light. So I'm doing the same thing over here because again, the light source is over here, so both of them will be darker on the left, and shadows on a round object are typically kind of in a crescent shape. And once I've done that, I will go ahead and add some stems. Very loose, very simple, and then some grass-like leaves. And I'm being pretty messy with these. Then I'll take my darkest olive green color and I'm just going to put it in a few places just to create a little bit of variation within these leaves. I'll put some more on the bottom because again, the light won't be hitting the base of these leaves as much, and I could also make it a little bit darker if I want to on the left side of these leaves, but it doesn't have to be super precise. Again, we're just having fun, and this is just super fun, super loose, but it is a great way to think about your light source and your shadows. Then I'm going to grab my water and my wet brush, and I'm going to have my paper towel super handy so that I can blot extra water off on it. And I'm going to go in here and start by kind of creating a little bit of those center kind of, I don't know if you want to call them spindles or wagon little spokes. Just do a little bit of that in the center of both of the flowers very quickly and loosely. And then I will work my way from the light side of each flower onto the dark side. And I'm just kind of dropping the water on here almost like in a dotting motion so that it's not filling the whole thing, but it's just kind of going, you know, a little bit of jumping up and down sort of, and letting the colors mingle. And as you can see, this side of the flower is definitely warmer and lighter than the other. Let's go ahead and do the same thing down here. Again, I'm just kind of bouncing my brush around a little bit, just with up and down, jumping little strokes, if you will. And then fill in the base here. This one I feel like I'm almost losing some of my detail. I'm almost getting a little bit too much water on there, so I need to dab my brush off. It'll be okay, but it's just, like I say, I feel like I'm drowning this one a little bit. All right, then I'll come in here and just wet the leaves. And again, I always like starting on the lighter side. I'm actually going to mingle this purple, let the stem mingle into the flower because that looks quite pretty when I do that. Kind of harmonizes the painting. We could even throw a little bit of purple into our leaves and that can be really pretty as well. Again, I want to start kind of closer to the light. When I start in the dark, I need to be careful that I don't drag my darks into my lights and make the lights disappear. That's the temptation with the watercolor pencils. It's really easy to just kind of massage things a little too much or get your darks and your lights mingling just a little too much and you lose them. So I always like to start in the lighter areas. Then I will grab my purple and I'm just going to drop a tiny little bit of it, either the purple or the purple pink, and just drop it in a few places on the leaves just to kind of, as I said, create a little bit of harmony and variation within the green colors. And this part you really don't want to massage the colors around. You just want to get it on there and then leave it alone. Next, let's paint some cosmos. So to do that, I'm going to take my yellow pencil and I'm going to do some centers for these flowers. I'm going to do one of them, maybe this front one here. Again, you could always give yourself a little dot where you want these flowers to be. But I'm thinking this front one I'm going to do as more of a full open cosmos that's facing us. This one is going to be a little bit of a side profile. Or maybe you could even say a 3/4. And then this one I'm thinking to do it so that it's completely on its side and you're not even going to be able to see the center. So we're going to have a few different positions happening here. So I'm going to go ahead next and do my petals, and I'm going to draw them all with this pink, but then I'm going to go ahead and add some other, purples and whatever, a little bit of mauve color after. So I'm just going to do these ones first. And what I'm going to do to give myself some guidance is I'm going to draw a very light line on each side of this, almost like I'm creating an X. And then I'm going to turn those into petals, and the petals tend to be a little bit narrower at the base and a little bit more wide, and even a little bit, sometimes a little bit on the slightly squared side of the tops of each one. But I'm just going to lightly draw these in, and I'm not being overly persnickety about getting them perfect because petals rarely are, and they actually look pretty when you have a little bit of character in them. And so I'm going to do those first 4, and then I'm going to come in and fill another 4 in between those. And sometimes these will be large enough that they don't leave much space between each of the other petals, and other times you will see more space. So I'm just going to go ahead and do that on each of those. Now I don't really like how bold that line is, but that's okay. We're going to get rid of it as we color and add our veins and textures. So you can just kind of tweak anything that you're not quite 100% happy with. And then I'm going to go ahead and do this one. And in this case, rather than having the X thing, you can think of our first 4 petals as kind of being something more like that. So this front one is going to be more on its side, and you're not going to be able to see the full thing. This one you'll see, and these ones will be kind of more on the side. So let's go ahead and I'll show you what I mean. I'm going to do this front one, or sorry, this back one, just kind of almost the same as I did these guys. Then I'm going to go ahead and do this one a little bit more flat. That one's going to be a little bit more flat. And then this one is going to be a little bit of an unusual shape. It's going to be kind of facing us, so it's like turned like this. So you can't really see the full length of it because it's not laying down like that. So then these ones that fill in the spaces around it are going to be somewhere in the middle in terms of how they are, how much of them you can see. So this one will be very, fairly similar to this, just a little bit set on its side. This one will be sort of the same. And then this one is going to be, again, it's almost like an in-between from these two, right? Or between these two, where you're going to see a little bit more of it, but it's going to be a little bit of a unique angle. So there we have it. That one is, like I say, it's not quite side profile. Maybe that's a 3/4. I don't know. And then this one, what I'm going to end up having is kind of something like the base where the flower is kind of sitting, but then I'm going to have all these petals coming like this. And so I'm just going to go ahead and do, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 of them. Maybe this one will be tipped downwards, but basically be creating the same sort of petals that I was doing here for these top ones. And then when we go to the side, it's going to be a little bit narrower because we're not seeing the full petal. Same thing here. And then this one, we can kind of do whatever we want because he's a little bit tipped, and we're still seeing the side of him, or the side of this petal, but it's, it could be twisted in any direction as it's drooping a little bit. And then you can go in and just fill in some of these ones behind, give the impression that there is some other petals there. Sometimes you can see them peeking through, other times not. And those back ones will want to make them a little bit darker than the front ones. So that is our cosmos, and let's add some stems quick, and then some leaves. And the leaves of these are very delicate. They're kind of, I don't know. I don't even know if you quite call them leaves, but they're just very fine little branch things. So I'm just going to do that, just kind of get some really fine, delicate little branches, if you will, or they're not even branches. Sorry, botanists. I'm not sure what I call these. But they're just very delicate, lacy little foliage. How's that? That sort of fills in the gaps that we have here. Now, to bring some life to this, we can kind of vary our colors. So I'm just going to go ahead with my pink. Oh, sorry, I kind of sliding off of the camera view here. All right, I'm gonna go ahead with my pink and just fill things in really softly and lightly on this first cosmos here. Again, I'm just kind of using a slightly linear circular motion. So I'm not going this way across the petals. I'm still kind of moving in the direction of where the creases and folds of the petals would be, just so that when and if the texture will show after I've added the water, it still kind of adds a little bit of dimension to this flower. Then what I'm going to do is just add some of these little veins, kind of centering off from the middle of the flower to create the impression of like little creases or folds. And I'm using a slightly darker pink. This is kind of a mauve color. I'm thinking I might leave this one just a little bit of a softer pink. So what I'm going to do is do these little creases and folds with the pink itself. And maybe I'll throw in a darker pink because this one is a slightly purple pink. What I might do is throw this pink in. It's a darker pink. I'll show you my 3 pinks. Let me just do that on a quick piece of paper so you kind of have an idea what I'm using and you can match those with whatever pinks you have. And of course you don't have to follow what I'm doing either. You could absolutely make your color palette just, like I say, a variety of pinks or whatever color you want. So I'm just going to wet those so you kind of have an idea, and then if you are following along and you want something similar, you can see there's my lightest pink. This is the one that's a little bit mauve. We did use that one on the pansy. And then finally my dark pink. So you can kind of see what colors I have here. So this flower here, I use the pink and the more mauve color. This one, I'm going to throw a little bit more of this other color on after. First, I'm starting with my light pink. And again, I'm just kind of going in the direction, and this is where it gets interesting on these ones. But you can kind of get the impression of what's happening there, right? And then I might just throw a teeny weeny bit of this closer to the base or closer to the center of the flower. And we can always add details in a second layer, so I'll just go around and do that. And I'll add a little bit of life as well to this in a minute. Let's fill this one in using the mauve. Well, I'm not going to add that extra pink. I'm just going to go in with the mauve and do these kind of creases and folds. But then I'm also going to go a lot darker in these ones that are behind. So I'm going to go sneak in between these petals with a darker amount of mauve to kind of give the impression that they are behind. I don't mind this one just being a little bit less dark because most of it's still showing, but I'll try something like that. Just deepen this a little bit here, but I want these front ones to just be that little bit lighter. This one can be a little darker because it's maybe getting a shadow cast on it from the flower above. All right, so I'm going to leave that like that, and then I'm just going to come in and just push my greens a smidgen with my olive green. Now I'm a little bit wet. This pencil is, so it's acting up a little bit. So take caution if your pencil's wet. And I'm not going to go everywhere with this, but actually the wet pencil is behaving kind of interesting on these lacy things. That's actually kind of like the effect. And I don't want to go everywhere. It's easy to get carried away and want to put this same color everywhere, and then it will pretty much be nowhere because it defeats the variation we have, right? We want to have some of that lime green or light yellow green showing still. So be careful you don't overdo, which is what the temptation is for me. Add a little bit there too. And yeah, you can add wherever you want. And then finally, I want to add a little bit of life to the center of these cosmos. And I'm just going to grab kind of a brown or a gold color. Which one should I go with? Maybe the one this one is the burnt sienna. And then this one is more like the golden ochre color. I'll just show you again on this paper what exactly they are so that you can make your decisions accordingly. I'm kind of leaning towards using the burnt sienna. Yeah, this one is too yellow. It's just not going to show up enough. So I'm going to use the burnt sienna color, or if you got a terracotta, just kind of a nice brown that's a little bit warm, just a little bit on the orangey red side. And I'm going to apply that kind of in a scribbling motion to one side of my center. So I'm going to zoom in so you can see those. And just really just scribbling up and down, a little bit of a zigzag. And I'm going to call that good. So to add the water, I might start with this one back here. And as always, I'm going to start my lightest areas and work my way into my darks. And I'm not minding if I drag a little bit of a pink color from petal to petal, unless I start to get a little too intensely pink, then I'll back off and wash my brush. But right now I'm just using a slightly damp brush and coming in and starting again in the light, stroking my paintbrush into my darker areas so that I preserve my lights and my darks are still there. And if I want to throw any more darks, I can always do what we mentioned before and just grab that dark pink pencil that we used and drop a little bit in some areas. But I'm actually mostly happy with how that one is looking. I'm going to leave the center for a minute because I have things quite wet and I don't want to smudge my center into the rest of the petal too badly. It's pretty to have a bit of smudging, but I think I'm a bit too wet. So I'm going to go ahead and work on this top one here, and then I will come back after. So again, lightest areas first, drag into the darks. Lightest first, drag into the dark. In this case, I think it might be pretty to touch that green and let it see what it does if it mingles the two colors together. Let's see that. Yes, I kind of like that. Since I've got green on my brush now, I'm just going to come down and drag my green around and just play with this a little bit, and then I'll come back in and fill in those other shapes. So I'm just using the tip of my brush, and I'm kind of just jumping around, just very soft pressure here. So I'm almost like skipping around a little bit with my damp green brush. It's green now because I've got some green pigments. I'm just letting those blend, and I think that's quite pretty. You can even create like a little bit of that effect with just using your brush that's got pigment on it, and you can extend your leaves or whatever this little bit of foliage is, and just kind of extend it a little bit with the soft green that's on your brush. Again, you want to kind of massage the paint where it is, or the pigments where they are there, so that you don't have a really dry looking stem. I'm on a roll here, so I might as well just carry on with the green. I'll come back in and do my pinks in a minute. And there's also no reason you can't grab a little bit of paint as usual off of your paint or off of your pencil and just add a little bit more detail if you want to. Again, I'm just kind of like almost using like a skipping, dotting motion like with my brush. I'm just kind of almost pushing down enough that the paint creates a little bit of dotting or stroking, and then I lift it just so that it's got a little bit of variety happening here. Then I'm going to come in and do the same thing with this petal here. Again, always starting in my lights, dragging into the darks. And when I feel like my paintbrush gets a little bit too much dark on it, I'll have to wash it. I don't mind having a little bit of the darkness and dragging it around, but it's really easy to get carried away and not wash your brush often enough, and then you'll end up with kind of like flattening the effect where you're going to end up, I'm going to wash my brush now. You'll end up losing the lights and everything will end up kind of being the darker pink or purple color. So definitely be aware of that. You don't have to wash between every petal, but as soon as things are starting to kind of get a little too dark in your light areas, you know it's time to wash your brush. I've kind of dug a little bit into my center there, which I could lift it out a bit, but I think it's going to bleed by doing that. That's okay. We'll let it bleed a little bit. I'll just see what happens. I can always come in with a little bit more color if things bleed around too much. I'm going to do the same to the center. Now it's mostly dry, so it should handle that better. Yeah, you can see that yellow is kind of bleeding, but isn't that pretty? As long as that effect doesn't get kind of carried away and I lose my center, I don't mind the fact that that yellow is just kind of doing a little bit of that. So let's just go in and quickly fill up the tops of these little guys in the back here. And again, you got to use the tip of the brush to just make sure you stay in your small areas. And you can work with the smallest brush that you are comfortable with. I feel like using a slightly larger brush does help you to kind of loosen up a bit. It's really easy to want to have to work too tightly. I mean, this is a very tight project as it is, but having a larger brush can sometimes just almost naturally help you loosen up when you're ready for that. I'm going to go ahead and just use my dirty brush and kind of just add a little bit of it to these front ones because I feel like they're almost like the flower's almost disjointed. I don't know if I like that. It's okay. It feels like maybe it's a bit mushed together, but overall I think it's pretty. You know what I might do is just throw a tiny bit of this pink that I used over here. I'm going to throw it a little bit into this one just because I feel like these two are matchy and this one is just almost alone. So I'm just going to throw a little bit of it into here. So this is one that's a little bit more of the reddish magenta pink. I don't know, do we like that? It definitely harmonized things a bit. I will probably have to let that dry so that I don't mush in it too much more because I will get a mess. I can always reassess later or add more details after if I feel like things have gotten lost back there. Once this is thoroughly dry, I'm just going to come in and just accentuate things a little bit. Again, optional, this last step, it's just if you feel like you want a little bit more. Whoops, that was a weird curl. And you can actually even go ahead and erase at this stage. It's not coming off very well, but because everything's dry, the paper is a little bit stronger again. You have to imagine the paper is very weak when it's wet, but once it's dry, you can come in with a few more details if you desire to. I actually think I like that one the way it is. It has a bit of an outline, but I think I'm okay with that. I'm going to just push in a couple areas here where things are kind of hard to tell what's on what layer, and I know that was my fault. I added a lot of water when I was wetting it. I'm just going to push my pink a little bit there with my magenta. I think I like that better. I don't know. That might be a bit harsh, but I'm going to come in here and just throw a few little touches of water on top of this. But again, this final wetting is optional as well because you can just leave watercolor pencil dry if you like the look. So our final flower today will be a zinnia, and I'm going to go ahead and draw where the center of this flower will be, and I'm going to slightly tilt it. And I'm just going to do a single flower this time to keep things simple. And then I'm going to use the orange and red orange, so we kind of use some colors we haven't already been using. And I'm just going to go ahead and give us some quick guidance as usual to kind of figure out approximately where we want our petals to be. So you could do something like this. You can almost imagine that this is an elliptical pattern or area where these petals are going to be fitting, but by putting these little lines here, it's going to give me some idea where I want to put those petals. So we're going to go ahead and just start drawing some of these petals in, and they're very basic and just kind of narrower when they come to the center of the flower, and then they kind of get wider as they move back away from the flowers. So I'm going to just do some of these, and you definitely don't have to have your petals evenly spaced. It's actually better if they're not. I just went ahead and made things even more evenly spaced just for the sake of simplicity, but flowers do look better if you don't make things too equal or too even. So definitely don't, whoops, kind of going a little goofy there. I'm just going to erase that. Don't aim for equal spacing if you can help it. I feel like I've kind of got things a little bit too equal here. I'm going to try and break that up by starting to overlap a little bit and put this behind this one and this one behind this one. Like I say, was trying to keep things simple when I spaced it out, but I honestly feel like I'm a little bit too, I don't know, everything's a little bit too lined up. Hopefully when I add more of these petals underneath, we'll be able to kind of get rid of that feeling. So I'm just going around and continuing to add more petals under the ones that we already have, and you're going to be able to see more of them along the front here, and that's where we can thankfully get a little bit more of a broken effect where things aren't too contrived looking. I'm going to go in with my red orange and I'm going to do these little creases and folds on these top petals here. But then what I really want to aim for is to kind of get this darker color going between the top petals. And underneath here, so each of these I want to have it darker as it's coming closer to the center of the zinnia, and then let it fade out. So I'm going to go ahead and do that on all of these. And I'm going to put some, again, almost the way that I did with the cone flower, where this petal is meeting this one. It gets darker as those two edges are meeting. Dark back here. Dark where the edges are meeting and fade it out. Can you see that? How I'm kind of trying to darken again anywhere where there's a petal behind another petal. The darker one, or the behind one, is always going to be a little bit darker. And then finally, I'm going to come on top of everything with my orange and just kind of fill that in very softly, lightly. I don't want to go too heavy because I don't want to actually lose my reds there. And then with my yellow ring, I'm going to do it a little bit more jagged. I'm going to come in and just kind of really almost scribble. I'm going to come right underneath of the yellow ring on the front and do that kind of scribble. Again, I don't know if you want to say like little scribbles or stars, and then I'm going to do that in the very center as well. Again, I'm just really scribbling very jagged. And if I want a deeper red, I can push it a little bit with this dark pink, which is kind of a magenta color. I still feel like that could be even pushed further. But if you have a darker red than this, you could definitely use a darker red. I'm going to actually throw a tiny, tiny little bit of purple in there too. That maybe is a little bit of a risk, but I'm going to just put a tiny bit in there. And then I'm going to go ahead and get a little bit of texture happening with maybe the brown and then the pink, which I don't know if I'm going to be 100% happy with my decision here. We'll see. I'm going to be very careful as I wet it. And then finally, let's go ahead and draw some leaves really quick. And zinnia leaves are quite pointed. So I'm just going to go ahead and do a few simple leaves. I can't even say these are perfect for a zinnia, but like I say, they're pointed, so I'm going to just call that good. Maybe I'm taking a little bit of artistic license here. I'm going to fill it in really quickly with some olive green, and then I will come in and add a few little veins with the darker olive green that I have. And then, like I say, some veins. These have some nice long veins. And I'll just darken things kind of along the base of this flower where the sunlight would be not getting as strong. And putting a little bit here where there would be a cast shadow. I just went and sharpened my pencil and I'm getting better lines here. I was getting a little dull. It's always a good thing to keep a sharp pencil when you're working probably in any medium, whether it's regular colored pencil or a drawing pencil or watercolor pencil. They especially get dull when you start wetting them, right? In which case it doesn't matter if they're dull, but then when you go back and use them later, you need to make sure they're sharp. I'm going to throw a little bit more yellow in a few spots, or not yellow, the yellow green. All right, let's go ahead and wet it. So I'm going to fill in the lightest areas as usual. I've said that a few times already, but fill it in. I'm going to do the top petals first so that I don't blend all of the petals together all at once. And as soon as I start dragging too much red around, that's where I'm going to wash my brush, because I don't want to lose my lightest oranges, because they're going to help create the definition when we darken our red colors. You can see as I got close to the center of this, I'm actually touching against that purple, and it's actually blending kind of pretty. So I'm just going to go ahead and just let that dot around, if you will, dab it rather with my water, and finish wetting that orange shape. And I'm going to let that dry for a second while I go down and work on the leaves, and then hopefully I can come up and do the more red looking ones. Actually, let's go ahead and do part of the center. I'm going to dot the center and this yellow section, and we'll see. Ooh, kind of getting it a little bit dull. Actually, I don't think I mind that though. We'll see how it behaves as it continues to dry and as the colors mingle. Let's go and do the greens quickly. Ooh, went over the line there. Oh well. I might as well let that mingle then. Okay, I'm going to pause the video for a quick minute and let this sort of dry. You can see things are mingling, and I don't mind that, but I don't want to wet these lower shapes until things are just a touch more dry, I think. Let me just see. I'll try one and see what happens. I kind of have a feeling I'm not, well, can I do it? Might be okay. We'll see. Might have to come in and push my details again after I do this. Right now it's behaving okay. And yes, my green is running into my orange, and I'm okay with that. I think it's kind of pretty, but if you don't think it's kind of pretty, that's where you want to let it dry before you touch your, you'd either have to do the flower and then let it dry thoroughly before you do the leaves, or vice versa. You really just don't want them both wet at the same time. Yeah, it's actually not too bad. I think I can get away with wetting these back shapes. I wasn't sure if I was going to have to dry it first, but I think it looks okay. Alrighty, and there is our beautiful zinnia. Well, that wraps up our florals for today, but stay tuned because I have more flower garden favorites coming soon. In the meantime, I hope this tutorial has brought a little taste of God's beauty and peace into your everyday life, and that it's inspired you to continue enjoying your own creative journey. See you again soon. Bye!